the international side, Russia's attack on the Ukraine and the resulting sanctions going to have a major impact on its own economy. Moscow is facing growing international isolation, and its nuclear energy export sector is likely to suffer. What significance is there to us here in South Africa on that? Well, to help look at the sector and whether it can withstand the strains of this war, joined by University of Johannesburg's physics professor, Hartmut Winkler. Prof, good morning to you. Thank you very much for your time. So you and I sitting down here in the southernmost tip of Africa looking at the energy export sector. Help me understand why this could be so important.
All right. Well, in the past decade or so, Russia has been very interested in selling its nuclear technology to virtually anywhere else in the world that would be willing to buy it. It's been part of their strategy not only to save their own nuclear industry because they just needed as many foreign contracts as possible, but also there was this element that once you have some kind of an arrangement with that, bear in mind, this is not a short-term thing. This is not something where you just come and quickly build something and out within a year. We're talking of build times of 10 years or so. And then after that, there's usually a maintenance and supply contract. So this arrangement is something which would typically last 40 years. If a country gets into that, they are basically tied to Russia. And there is this element that of dependency, which could influence a country's foreign policy. So Russia has been very active in Africa. It has agreements with roughly 20 countries on the continent. It also has builds already going in countries like Turkey, Bangladesh, Egypt. And part of the reason for that is indeed to establish a global presence, to build allies. And now we're in a situation where, with this war having happened, I believe that this is going to crash this whole initiative. Where builds have already started, I think those are in great danger of not being finished at all. It was even within Europe. For example, Russia was going to be building a new nuclear plant in Finland that has basically already come to an end in the last couple of days. There's just no real way one can get involved in a long-term relationship of that nature with a country that which is unstable. And at the moment, nobody really knows how Russia is going to be looking in, even in a years down the line. Whether they win the war, whether they lose it, doesn't matter what.
Economically, some suggesting the damage, if not already having reached its peak, is going to reach its peak very soon for the Russian economy as well. The problem, I imagine as well, Professor, is that if we start seeing these various nuclear programs around Eastern Europe and around Europe that are linked to Russia falling down, energy exports and energy keeps each country's economy going. We know that here, because of the blackouts, it's going to have an economic knock-on effect for those countries, which in the end is going to have an economic knock-on for the rest of the world, isn't it? It's a global issue. It's almost as though a butterfly flaps its wings in one part of the world scenario.
Yes, well, in many respects, the whole energy shortage and energy supply question is at the root of this Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Many countries in Western Europe, which are now the most critical of Russia, are actually energy dependent on Russia as well. There was the gas line project, which Germany has just stopped. There's a lot of oil imports. Americans are currently asking whether they should continue doing so. So it is very much that if you do have these interrelationships, it does add an element of vulnerability. And I think that's really come to the fore now. And yes, and in other countries, they're already bracing themselves that they're going to have to be doing far more than they have already been doing. There has been this talk of global warming, and therefore let's get moving. This has really brought the thing to a head. And so I think as far as energy is concerned, we're going to see a lot of things happening in the next year or so, which probably people weren't expecting to happen nearly as fast as they're going to.
I can't help but wonder, Prof, just before I say goodbye to you, if this wasn't part of the strategy from Russia to move towards Chernobyl. And the name of the other nuclear power plant in Ukraine fails me for a moment, but I know there was moves towards that power plant. Yes. In fact, there were shells being lobbed into it, and they had to eventually stop this onslaught on that nuclear power plant. If Russia is so focused on nuclear power, and holding that sector, I can't help but think the move towards those two must have been strategic for that reason.
Yes, I think the main reason they wanted to at least stop the power supply from there, because Ukraine is highly dependent on nuclear energy. More than 50% of their electricity comes from nuclear energy. They're almost unique in that respect in the world. And that Zaporozhye plant, which did come under attack, is their biggest one. And they have 3 more. And another one was already being, certainly one of the targets, even though it hasn't been attacked directly. It also puts into the question the whole notion about to what extent should one focus all one's electricity production capacity in one single location, as opposed to having a whole lot of smaller plants scattered throughout the country, which is what you would get with renewables typically. So it is going to raise this sort of question as well. If one country has one big plant, but which supplies most of its electricity, then that certainly becomes a potential target.
It really does. And if you take out that one particular power plant, you can bring the entire country and the economy to a standstill. Professor, very, very good points. Yes. I always so enjoy talking to you. Thank you so much. Professor Hartmut Winkler from the University of Johannesburg.